Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. We're back for another year, 2023, myself and Rory O'Neill. And we've been joined by two of RTÉ's new pundits, of Keegan of Mayo and Peter Canavan of Tyrone. Welcome aboard, lads. It's a pleasure to have you both with us. Lee, this is your first step into punditry, so you're starting at the top with the podcast. We're not easing you in at all. Not easing you in with a step onto TV or whatever. No, straight into the podcast. So best of luck with that. Are you looking forward to Are you happy to have jumped the ditch at this stage?
Yeah, I was just sitting with the wife last day saying I ventured a new world of the unknown, I think. So it should be interesting. The only good thing, and I don't want to, slag too many people, but the age profile looks much better now that I'm in it. So I can only give myself compliments from that perspective. But regardless of the performance after, I'll let you judge that.
Jesus, Peter, he's come out swinging straight away.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks, Lee, for that. We've got to order a new thing.
Yes, we're back to preview the league, and look, myself and Rory we were going to do an O'Byrne Cup podcast, but Rory's computer and microphone were all the way at the top of the house, and he didn't feel like walking up. And I'd already had a conversation with someone about Gaelic football earlier in the week, so I didn't think it was fair to have another conversation with someone later in the week. So we didn't do an O'Byrne Cup podcast. The O'Byrne Cup is now finished, and the Walsh Cup in hurling, just to mention, will finish whenever Wexford play Galway in the league. So the old pre-season, it wasn't a great January for Leinster pre-season tournaments, but the rest of them, kind of carried on in their merry way as normal. Lee, they always say people are going to miss their, Jesus, it'll be hard to watch them play. All credit to the University of Galway Connacht GAA Airdome. I can't imagine you were feeling pangs of regret during the FBD Cup, but Saturday night now, yourself and Peter are both going to be there for RTÉ television, but that might be when it hits you that you're no longer a Mayo player. I'd say, I know it's the league, but it is Galway coming to Castlebar.
Yeah, I hadn't played FBD in a good few years either. I actually was part of the last winning team 12 years ago to win it, so that'll tell you the nature of not the competition, but I suppose. Was
that in New York?
No, it was actually, well, we back then we used to get a trip to New York, but I think we pulled it because we ended up cancelling it a couple of times. But I used to love this thing with the dome as well. It's a big sellout, but I think it's only holds 1,500. So, I mean, it wasn't that I was full capacity in terms of thousands and thousands. But yeah, I think Saturday night would be probably a different perspective for myself. And, with the rivalry of Mayo Galway, a huge game and one that we always look forward to, regardless if it was FBD or league or championship. So that always got the juices flowing, particularly with a derby game, regardless of who was playing, who was out. So, yeah, I suppose it'll be interesting sitting in commentary, but I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's a huge game for the weekend to kickstart the league, and I'm sure it'll start with a few tatters and bangs.
Yeah.
On the first whistle.
Well, one man your former teammates won't have to worry about is Shane Walsh. The Galway man, probably would have been given the weekend off after winning the Club All-Ireland final with Kilmacud Crokes. But now, Rory, we don't even know whether he has won or whether that result is going to stand. Obviously, everybody is well and painfully aware of the saga at this stage of the 16th man. And, Glen eventually 2 nights ago did lodge an appeal. And now, I'm not going to bore people with the details, but obviously how Kilmacud deal with this, whether they counter-object or give a written admission, etc., will determine the next steps and how long it takes. But there is a chance, Rory, that this could drag on till the end of February if a replay is called, but not soon enough because I think there's a wedding in Glen. So it's put a real dampener on the end of the first club season that was, kind of being sold as, here is 6 months for the club. This is we're putting it in the shop window. We're giving it all the love and care it needs. So it's really, really unfortunate how the final actually ended.
Yeah, and I think there's no point in raking over rights and wrongs at this stage. Everybody has had their say, including nearly both camps. Well, except for obviously Kilmacud. It'll be interesting to see
both camps except one.
sorry, except one. But I suppose, look, they'll probably come out with their position. As you just mentioned, it's really unfortunate that it has ended this way. But it's not in isolation. The first thing I would say is there's a sort of an endemic and real problem. I remember Kevin McStay on the Sunday Game nighttime program. I was on it a good few years ago, and he made a very key point, which I think maybe got lost. There's a deeply dissatisfactory way of finishing an awful lot of Gaelic, particularly Gaelic football. Hurling doesn't seem to have the same problem. When a match is tight coming down the stretch, for some reason, we can't conclude a game in an orderly fashion. Now, is that and we've seen it on countless occasions where if it's a sideline incursion, whether a big fisticuffs break out, where the referee conducts the wrong score, makes an administrative error, whether there's, we saw it with Galway Armagh last year. We've seen it countless times down through the years. Even look at the situation. I mean, Lee, I don't want to rake over old coals from your point of view, but look at what happened in the 2017 All-Ireland football final when Mayo were hunting Dublin down and Dublin got that score to put them a point up, and effectively half the Dublin team decided to pull every single Mayo player to the floor on the next resulting kick-out to ensure that the game again ended in rancor and in a dissatisfactory manner. And I think from that point of view, it's a failure of rules. Now, I've heard people say, we should bring in new rules. I just think you need to apply the rules that are there. I think the rules that are there are absolutely fine. For some reason, we just can't. And by the way, it's not in isolation. Like the end of the junior final, which wasn't a bad game, and like Peter will obviously have had a small bit of a vested interest there, given Stewartstown were involved. I mean, that nearly finished like a soccer match, 11 aside. Was there 7 sent off? I mean, like the club season, for all that we were told that it was going to be, this new great vista, I think has finished with a really sour note on 2 out of the 3 finals. In a club sense, and even in the intermediate final, sure, Jesus, it's a case of what do you have in yourself there from a Kerry perspective, because they just seem to win that every year. I think it's deeply disappointing right across the board, and I don't know. I mean, it's
what Peter kind of what I think what Glen feared happening is exactly what happened, because even though it seemed clear from the rulebook that the CCCC could have obviously kind of instigated an investigation themselves. It's in the rule book for this kind of infraction. They could have, they told Glen, it seems, according to Glen, they told him in no uncertain fashion, we won't be doing anything, you need to lodge an objection. And Glen obviously were reluctant to do this. And it's very obvious why, because as soon as they did lodge an objection, a lot of people, the sympathy disappeared, and people said, Jesus, lads, you lost by 2 points. You got a 1-3 to no score head start or whatever it was. Shane Walsh didn't score from play. Paul Mannion was very quiet. Do you think you're going to do any better the next day? And they knew this. They knew as soon as they lodged the objection, people would frame it in a certain way. And that's really unfair on Glen. That's what really annoys me with this. I don't know if the match should be replayed. I don't know if Kilmacud should be fined. I think a replay might be a bit extreme, but Glen felt like they had been they had been harshly treated, and so they were within their rights to appeal, but they were reluctant to do so, and they've been proved right now, haven't they?
Well, absolutely, and you could gather from Mikey O'Rourke's reaction immediately after the game. He knew that they were wronged, and he wasn't happy about it. But his initial reaction, his natural instinct was, that's it. There's going to be nothing we will do about it. It's not Glen's way of doing things. But I would say a number of people within the club, maybe at committee level, and there was a lot of neutral observers who had their say and who were encouraging Glen to go down this the road they have gone down. And it's a road that I was surprised that they did take. And you've quite rightly said that they appear to be, taking quite a bit of flack for it now. When is this going to be finalised? It could well run into the end of February to the start of March. Does that mean that those players will not, the county players, will they not play for their county team? And that has serious ramifications for the league, particularly from a Derry point of view. Yeah. And I would say this decision was the last thing that Rory Gallagher would have wanted. because Derry are in Division 2. If you come, in the bottom 2 or 3 teams of Division 2, there's every possibility that you'll not get to be in the round robin, that you'll not get to perform in the Sam Maguire. So that puts serious pressure on him and his squad to make sure they're in the top half of Division 2. And they're going to have to play possibly a number of games without 2 or 3 of their best players, without Conor Glass, without Ethan Doherty, without Emmett Bradley. So I'm sure he's left scratching his head, because I can't see this being solved in a very short space of time, because I do think that Kilmacud will put in a counter objection. They will claim that they have done nothing wrong, even though it was clear that they had an extra player on the pitch. They will say that their sub, was given the go-ahead to go on, and that the referee didn't allow time to get the other player off the pitch, Darren Mullen off the pitch. So it's an unfortunate set of circumstances. I don't think there's going to be any winners out of it. And, I think it was David Goffin himself said about the procedures being fundamentally flawed. And that's, it's this business of players running onto the pitch and all the rest, subs going on. It happens all over the place. But in this case, the referee got it wrong. He allowed the 45 to be taken when clearly he should have signalled to Darren Mullen that he was to get off the pitch.
Yeah.
One interesting aspect though, Mikey, we were down doing a pitch inspection on our own grounds here yesterday. The grounds committee, who are, we'll say, have a certain vintage, and we were walking the pitches, and I turned around and I said to them, Did you watch the All Ireland Club final on Sunday, lads? And they said, it was a disgrace. And I said, oh, I know, Croke Park, the pitch. How did Croke Park allow the pitch be, so all they were concerned with was the fact that the pitch was they had no mention of what happened at the end of the game. It's just interesting, the different things that people take from different certain sets of circumstances. But
do you think as well, Glen are getting a huge amount of flack at the moment, but I think it essentially comes from the GA by, I suppose, putting the pressure on them to make a decision. If GA have taken that away from both sets of clubs and players, then would we be in the situation where Glen made the objection or appeal? Would they have been better off been told what's going to happen, rather than maybe there's that kind of the realization that they're put in that situation? So is they were going to be a win situation for either the clubs, to be honest? It's essentially coming down from the leadership from the GA as well.
Yeah, I think that's the case, Lee, that it's like this really needed leadership, and it needed to be, they needed to take the bull by the horns, I think, because effectively it was an error by their official, it was an error by the referee and his assistant on the line. I'm just curious, Peter, and I think I know the answer, but I have to ask you as we have you here. You've spoken about it many times because you've been asked about it many times. Obviously, Charlie Redmond refusing to go off the field in '95, and you said, look, in the time it took him to eventually go off the field, I don't think he kicked the ball. So I'm going to assume that there was never a breath of a conversation of Tyrone taking an appeal after that, was there? Did it ever come up in any way?
It was immediately after the game. We were well aware of it, and it was muted, I think, at the time, but it didn't. Again, back to Malachi's reaction, it was the same thing. He said, lads, we had a chance to win it, and we weren't going to win it in the boardroom. And other clubs and other counties have been in a similar situation than that. Yes, we were wronged, but we just felt that there was no point. The presentation ceremony had been given. Dublin were awarded to Sam Maguire, and I don't think we felt we could have went back on it, even though we probably had good grounds.
Yeah.
Did that precipitate the introduction of the yellows and red cards as a visual demonstration for lads when they should? Am I right?
Charlie Redmond said it did. Yeah, I think I read somewhere he said that. Yeah, because it was he deemed, well, whether he was genuinely unclear or not, Peter, he did have kind of an excuse, didn't he? Because
he said he wasn't sure what the ref indicated. Yeah,
it's very similar circumstances. Again, we have a Northern versus a Dublin team. Did Charlie know he was sent off? We'll never know. Did Darren Mullen?
No, he was being taken off.
That he was being taken off, and people were saying after, of course he did, and he was being smart. But I would argue again, if he knew that he was being taken off, he would have went straight off after the 45. He actually stayed on, and I think the referee had to tell him, "You're off the pitch. You're the man." So clearly he didn't know that, so it wasn't. And if Kilmacud staged this in such a way, I must say it was a remarkable bit of management. But I honestly think Darren Mullen didn't know.
No, I think that's where the system was flawed, like David said last night. So he goes essentially like, with every sub you make, you're going to have at some stage 16 players on the pitch until you have one that leaves. So therefore that crossover, like, and this, you're talking, Rory, about the pandemonium in late games. This is where it's happening a lot of the time as well, where it's very hard to get control of chaos, especially in tight games and big games like this. And that's, I will give Darren Mullen probably the benefit. He probably just thought maybe get back to the line, help his team. The last thing he's thinking of is looking at the sideline thinking I'm going to get subbed. Should the guy just got named man of the match? He's probably in a high firstly, but then I was trying to help win his team to Club All Ireland. So I'll probably give that point of view, but there probably needs to be something looked at in terms of how the subs are used and worked, because when we played international rules, say, and it's not something that could work, but until the player that's coming off crosses the line, the next player cannot come onto the pitch. So I do agree with David. It's very flawed, and it's a bad sequence of events that just happened. How we rectify it is going to be a bigger topic, I'm sure, as the weeks go on.
But Lee, do we want the situation now then? Say if they do act on this and implement a new rule that a player that's taken off has to come off before the other player comes on. In the last 5 minutes, how many single substitutions will we have? Soccer style players coming off, wagging at the crowd, really slow. It's going to frustrate a lot of.
Of course, I agree. But I do think we need to look at the system a lot. I do think refs, and I'm only just going on what David said last night. It's very hard to control unless we get some order on it. Now I do agree with your point, Peter. Yeah, you'll start bending the rules in terms of that as well. Absolutely, big game day as well. So, but we're doing that anyway. We're bending the rules. It's a matter of just trying to combat one rule break versus another nearly.
And soccer had to address it as well. I mean, they had to bring in a rule whereby the player coming off has to exit from the nearest point of exit to the field itself. So if he's over on the far corner flag, that's where he goes off. Plus, we all saw the amount of additional time that they were applying over the course of the recent World Cup, and do you want to go down that road where, a game of football lasts for 90 minutes. I mean, look, this is like, and all of this was being added on to, I suppose, circumvent and try and offset some of the cynical substitution making that is being done by managers. So I don't know, it's a tricky one, I suppose. Yeah. And legislation can always be a dangerous route to go because you just don't know about the law of unintended consequences.
Yeah,
we'll give Paul Mannion the benefit of the doubt. He took the nearest exit point.
Slowly, nearly. Yeah. So one thing I am an authority on over you two lads.
I think a replay is inevitable, though. By the way,
it would seem so.
Yeah, Rory.
I do. Yeah. It's 100% will be replayed. Honest, yeah. It has to be. It has to be. Peter.
I'd be very surprised.
Would you? Yeah.
I would be very surprised if there's a replay in this.
Are you assuming that the Kilmacud will go further appeal after the CCCC? Yeah,
I do. They'll lodge a counter objection, and there's going to be hearings, and there's going to be appeals, and well, time will tell. But
if justice is seen to be done, and if they're handed down a decent fine, I think that might in some way go to reducing the clamour around it, and it might
go towards Glen's wedding.
yeah. It might a bit of a cured egg, but it might mean that nobody's completely
I know better
about the whole thing.
I know better Buchels to have the financial muscle to lawyer up in this situation anyway, that's for sure.
Well,
Rory.
Yeah. We'll keep an eye on that situation. Anyway, look, guys, we'll get on and do a preview of the league as much as we can because, as Lee just said, I haven't played in the FPD in a few years. The pre-season tournaments are good for maybe unearthing a young player or two who may be useful down the line. I know Mayo have kind of given game time to a couple of young fellas and stuff like that. But Peter, I don't think you'd be looking at the Dr. McKenna Cup now and saying, it's great that Tyrone made the final, but geez, we got an awful scalping there from Derry, so the season's over. It's very much it seems to me that the pre-season tournaments outside of Leinster are almost more for the fans, and obviously the manager can kind of as I say, can kind of glean something, but I can't imagine, did you ever put a huge amount of stock in the pre-season tournaments, or would you be looking at the first couple of rounds of the league to kind of get a proper barometer of where you are?
Well, I was never a fan myself of the Dr. McKenna Cup, but I think it has Yeah, I think it has gone up in a lot of people's estimations here, and it is taken seriously. And I'll give you the example this year. In County Down, they've new management and Conor Laverty, and a lot of people were wondering how he would settle in and how the Down players would react. And he has taken the McKenna Cup really serious, and they've trained hard for it. And it is the result of that is there's now a serious momentum and a positivity in Down that there hasn't been for a few years, and a self-belief. And again, Derry and Tyrone in the games they've played have put out strong teams because they want to be up and running in the National League. You know, Armagh did this last year and put a serious emphasis on the start of the National League. And I think for a lot of teams, especially in Division 1, like Kerry in the first few opening games will not have theirs out. They will have for the latter half of the league. So, for teams that are intent on doing well and retaining maybe Division 1 status or pushing hard in Division 2, they will take these pre-league competitions very, very serious. So I would say that there's a lot to be read into the Dr. McKenna Cup this year, and you'll see teams moving forward, particularly up here, taking it more serious.
Yeah. So looking at Division 1 then, Lee, the Dr. McKenna Cup might be a good barometer because this is very much the Ulster and Connacht League with just the All-Ireland champions and defending league champions kind of thrown in for good measure. It's odd, isn't it, Lee, to look at the Division 1 and kind of mapping out the fixtures and seeing there's no Dublin. The big beasts are there. I know Kerry, the All-Ireland champs, but let's be honest, Dublin have dominated the football landscape for a decade or more. So to not have them in Division 1, it's just strange.
It is, and I suppose from a blockbuster game point of view for a lot of teams, they were, as you mentioned, they were the Ramblers. So anytime you got a crack at Dublin, it was kind of a sense where you are in terms of your league performances and where you're going for championship. So it will be strange in Division 2, and a team that you always just want to, I suppose, bring your A game against. That it's a great prep in terms of, I know it's the league we're talking about, but it's just great prep in terms of how you're going for further into the championship and looking at your performances. But I do kind of agree with Peter, and probably this year more so, and it probably the same applies to Mayo. They went out the FBD and they hit the ground running, and I know they tried a lot of players, but I suppose with the context of the Ulster and Connacht dynamic with so many Division 1 teams, I think it's about laying an early marker. So obviously Mayo playing Galway, playing Roscommon back to back, and then going to play Galway again the next week. I think it's just about laying an early marker regardless of who was playing for Galway or Roscommon. I think it's just about saying, right, we're going to get all our ducks in a row here. Bit of silverware, bit of momentum. I've tried maybe X, Y, and Z in terms of positions, different structure, different style of play. So I think for the likes of Down, as mentioned by Peter, Derry and Mayo, it was like trying maybe a different game plan, trying different players. And I think it's probably added a lot of confidence going into the big games of the weekend. So yeah, it's strange I've seen Dublin there. But again, I suppose the bigger context for a lot of these teams is that they're going to be playing each other 2, 3, 4 times over the year. So do you want to give too much away in the early season? Probably not, but do you want to hit the ground running? That's the way these teams are looking at it straight away.
Yeah, Rory, I don't know whether it's the the club final kind of Farrago is kind of taken away from it. I remember we were doing this podcast a year ago, and there was this palpable sense around the country of people. There was a clamour for the league. It was as if and maybe it was because it was the first full season out of COVID or whatever, but there was an anticipation about the league this year, and I'm not sensing it this year.
Yeah. Do you know what? No, that's very interesting that you say that, because it was one of the things I was thinking there to myself this morning. I actually think, do you know what? And again, people will say, "Oh, here he goes." It's so long since we've had intercounty. I think people have nearly forgotten what it actually brings. I think that's one of the things that maybe will hopefully come and manifest itself this weekend is to have the elite level of Gaelic games back this weekend. I think that when that realization comes, I think hopefully the excitement should kick in then. But yeah, it's funny. It just seems smaller in some way, and can't put my finger on why.
Do you think the Glen Kilmacud game has impacted a lot of it?
I don't know. It's just very hard to kind of get a handle on it. I do have, and I'm not saying I differ from the lads in any way. It's more of a theory, and again, look, I just throw it out there, and I'd be interested in everybody's view as always, but I'm just wondering, I think this is a guinea pig year we're in a very, very different ball game in terms of the number of games that teams are going to have to play. I think if you win the All Ireland from the qualifier, the prelim quarter final in Ulster, you're going to have to play 11 matches over the course of 13 weeks, 14 weeks, 13 weeks, I think. So I'm just wondering about the priorities in relation to the league. I think what we have seen in hurling, and I think hurling is probably the only thing that you can compare it to at that level, whereby when you have moved to a round robin in your championship format, I think the league becomes devalued, and certainly the elite levels. So Division 1 may in time, it might not happen this year, but Division 1 may become a bit of a false competition in that, like, one injury now and your season, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a big injury, a soft tissue injury that could knock you out for 6 weeks and bang, your season's over. So I think from that point of view, it's going to be very interesting to see how teams line up, what kind of priorities they put on it, what kind of systems they use, because I think we'll get a very clear indication of where priorities are lying at that point. The chances of teams deciding, I'm going to go full hell for leather here in January and February, knowing that ultimately I'm going to be judged on my championship performances, which aren't going to happen and are basically going to be condensed in post provincial championships. And the reality is this: the teams that contest the Sam Maguire, certainly the teams capable of winning it, I mean, they're going to be the same teams pretty much every year anyway. If you get relegated out of Division 1 now, I don't think it's such a big deal anymore. And I think we might even see that this year. The chances are it could be the very first time in I don't know how long that the team wins the All-Ireland from Division 2, because I think the way Dublin are moulding in the background there, or smouldering, I think, very, very dangerous. So I don't know. It's just only my own theory that I do think potentially Divisions 1 and 2 become slightly false competitions, and the real integrity of competition and the real honesty of competition might actually be in the lower divisions.
Rory, I think your point's valid for the top half of Division 1 maybe, but I would disagree with Division 2, because
I definitely disagree on Division 2. Yeah, it's too important.
It's more important every single game. So,
but Peter, in Division 2, and I don't mean this now in any disparaging sense, and I'm sorry to be cutting across back yet, but in Division 2 you have Louth and Limerick. With all due respect now, right? Is there any danger for Dublin, Kildare, Meath, Derry of going down to Division 3 when Louth and Limerick are in the same division?
But Rory, it depends.
Be honest now. Be honest.
Hold on a minute.
Be honest.
The teams that get into the round robin, the race for the Sam Maguire depends totally on how the provincial championships go. So you could have, 4 or 5 teams, unlikely, but you could have at least 3 who make a provincial final who play in Division 3 and 4. So you could end up with the possibility of in Division 2, the bottom 3 or 4 teams not competing.
And you don't know is the thing. You won't know what the cutoff point is either. So you don't want to be in the bottom half of Division 2.
Absolutely.
Because it's the 8 provincial finalists, Westmeath, and then the top 7 finishers in the league who aren't in provincial finals. When you say it like that, there's an awful lot of jeopardy to it.
What's to say Down will not get to an Ulster final? We know in Connacht that there's going to be a Division 3 or 4 team.
Absolutely.
What's to say Clare, Tipperary will not get. So there's every possibility that the bottom 3 or 4 in Division 2 will not qualify to play in the Sam Maguire.
And again, crucially, you won't know whether your league position is good enough until the provincial finals are set.
Yeah.
And that's why you take every game serious.
So Division 2
in Division 2.
Yeah.
So what Division 1 though, I think I think a lot of teams might kind of early from the trap, Rory, as well, just to get a few points on the board, so they can start looking at different styles of play and different players. You get 4 or 6 points early in the board, you can start planning then your provincial. You can start planning for the year ahead. So like the flip side of it is, I know Division, like going down is not essentially a huge deal for Division 1, but like essentially you want to be in a case where you can start looking at your squad and see what you have for the year ahead, rather than, try and chase points. And we've been part of that for many years, trying to chase points towards the tail end of the year, start picking up injuries, start losing performance in the flow of the year. So I think a lot of teams might target the early start of the year and then look further beyond by trying to get their squad depth involved as well.
And Lee, the other point on that is that in Division 1, the number of new managers there are as well. You know, you got Davy Burke in Roscommon, Vinnie Corey in Monaghan, you got Paddy Carr and Aidan O'Rourke in Donegal, and you got Kevin McStay in Mayo. So these guys won't be, you can't imagine there'll be too much experimenting. Well, there'll be a bit of experimenting, but they're going to want to win games. No new manager wants to start off his reign with 2 or 3 defeats.
No, and then because what essentially happens is if you're not getting the performance, you just can't. It doesn't come overnight, and you get on a case of losing games, and we've all had that. It's very hard to get momentum and confidence back into the next performance, and then when you start chasing results, it becomes more difficult. So there's going to be great enthusiasm with the new managers across all divisions to try and chase a national title. But I do agree to Rory's point to extent. I think you have to be smarter to look at the long-term picture. So I think a lot of these new managers will be targeting the first 3 to 4 games at a max with the hope that they have enough points on the board to secure Division 1 or 2 or 3, whatever it is, and then start planning for a year ahead. So these guys are under a little bit of pressure early on, but I expect them to put like big squads now from the first game onwards.
Rory, the interesting one I think is, you know, the reigning champions is Kerry, because Jack O'Connor's never entered a competition, McGrath Cup notwithstanding, that he hasn't wanted to win, but given the amount of games played by his players last year, and particularly by his
star players,
David Clifford, who played in every competition.
A lot of his star players.
But Clifford and his brother are the obvious ones, because they were playing until the end of the club season. They were playing for 2 clubs, a club side and a divisional side, colleges for Clifford, etc. There has to, as much as you want David Clifford on the pitch, and he's become like the Beatles, there's people following him around the country to watch him play for whoever he plays for. There has to be a sense from O'Connor that the rest has to be given to at least the Cliffords and probably a couple more of his frontliners for a few rounds of the league at least. And
throw in like a problem position that has been a problem position for Kerry for quite some time, because they've tried to keep David Moran strapped up and going for so long. Now you throw in his absence and you start to ask yourself, right, he's got to fill that gap now as well. And the presence and the leadership of somebody like that, that's not easily replaced in the short term. So he's got a bit of work to do. But I think, again, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm, you know, being overly negative certainly about Division 1. I do actually think this year's league will afford people like Jack O'Connor the opportunities to experiment and try lads out and give lads opportunities to go in. And like the reality in Kerry as well, I suppose, look, we all know the depth that they have. Okonbor is back in the mix, as we know, and they've got like obviously he had a very bad injury last year, so you don't know how fit he's going to be this year. They'll find midfielders, and I'm sure Jack will find some. Defending All-Ireland titles has been difficult from a Kerry perspective. I think they've only done it once in the last 30 years, which was what, 06, 07.
From a lot of counties perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you said it. So look, I think it's going to be a very interesting league from their point of view. They have a lot of travel. I think they're 4 away games. I mean, it's, you know, like they're going to be on the road to big long journeys up to Ulster, Galway.
Yeah. So,
you know, it's going to be a testing and trying league, but again, it probably gives him the opportunity to gel and bond the team again. So it'll be very interesting to watch Kerry, actually.
There's a big issue for Kerry, though, is the club scene as well, how much games there are afforded to play. So you're talking about region, then back to a club, and then the whole, I suppose, domination of intermediate junior All-Ireland. So that it's racking up games for a lot of those Kerry guys without actually knowing. So like they're nearly playing 6-7 more games than most club players would going on an All-Ireland run as well. So there's probably that bit of flawed system as well, that Kerry have dominated so many of these intermediate junior games for the last 10 years since the competition's been brought in.
Yeah. Throw the Sigerson in there as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Peter, I think maybe a lot of people would look at the 8 teams in Division 1 and the 2 they might be slightly concerned about in terms of relegation will be 2 of the Ulster sides. Well, aren't they all Ulster sides? But
don't forget Roscommon, the Norwich of Gaelic football.
Yeah, well, they might be the Norwich of the Gaelic football, but I think we've on occasion called Monaghan the cockroaches because they cannot be destroyed. They just hang on in Division 1. As everybody, you certainly know that Monaghan, they might be bottom, but the one week they're never bottom is the last week. But there's new managers going in there, Peter, and there does seem to be, you know, that word transition. Donegal, never short of good footballers, but obviously have lost Michael Murphy. Monaghan have lost some stalwarts as well, and kind of the thing that might concern people is the length of time it took both counties to find a manager, which just kind of from the outside looked a bit odd.
Yeah, Donegal in particular, Aidan O'Rourke and Paddy Carr have a massive job. Again, just looking at it from the outside, there was it took a long time. There was speculation that they had another man lined up within the county. He wasn't able to do it, and there's possibly a bit of fallout coming from that. The Letterkenny debacle in the county final last year. So, it'll be interesting to see how they begin. I think it's imperative for the new management that they get off to a good start. But you look at the 8 teams in Division 1 and you're thinking, right, who's under pressure here? I would say you leave Kerry aside, and there's 7 teams there, and I would say they're all thinking we need to be very careful we don't end up in the bottom 2. Yeah. And the reason I say that, you look at last year's league and the team that was relegated, Dublin. So if Dublin can be relegated, then any one of those, 7 teams can be. So I think it's going to be very keenly contested. And Roscommon, new manager, there'll be a bounce there. Kevin McStay, I'm sure that there's going to be a kick and a bounce in Mayo. They've got off to a good start. And how can you write off Monaghan? And they have the firepower up front to cause. So look, back to my point, these opening games, when counties are resting players from Sigerson for club and different things, are going to be so vital if you want to remain in Division 1.
100%. We'll move on to Division 2, lads, because as we did mention, and as actually we have in the past, Lee, we've started by previewing Division 2 because I do think it's the most interesting one, because you've got big counties in there and they're terrified of doing a Cavan, shall we say, and it's like sliding down the divisions, which can happen. We've seen it. Derry did it, Cavan did it, Cork did it. It happens to big counties. But they're also striving to get back up to Division 1, and you don't want to sit down in Division 2 for too long. As Rory says, you can win in All-Ireland from Division 2, but it'll probably be off the back of having won Division 2. You don't have a poor Division 2 season. And now, as we've tried to explain, but admit, you kind of need a degree in competition structures. There's a level of jeopardy around the Sam Maguire, because certainly if you're in the top 4 in Division 1, barring really freak provincial final pairings, you're going to be okay. But if you're 6th, or even 5th, you mightn't be altogether comfortable. And then you throw in the fact that Dublin and Derry are there. Yeah. Like, Dublin are Dublin, and Derry were one of the stories of the championship last year. So that's a Cork resurgent. You could say Clare are
resurgent now, might be overstretching it.
Okay. They won the McGrath Cup. So Lee,
but they have a good appointment in Kevin Welsh as well. So it's only going to help. And Kevin Welsh has proven, and we've come across many times, he's a results-driven guy. So whether that helps him going forward, we'll find out. But I do agree, Division 2 has always been a minefield. 2 and 3. But you look at the teams in Division 2, and the problem for a lot of them this year is Dublin. You might as well target them from the room, because having Dublin Division 2, it's probably changed a lot of the dynamic around how teams are going to look at it now. We're all going to make the same assumption that Dublin are going to win Division 2, based on the guys coming back, the back rooms, and some of the big game players. So, but again, you mentioned there, I've been impressed with Derry already this year, in terms of how they're approaching the kind of cup. Listen, we can look at Tyrone and say how poorly they played against Derry, but I thought the way Derry approached the game, played the game, they looked like they hit the ground flying, and that's why 3 of their best players, as mentioned already. So I'm actually fascinated with the game. Probably the game of Division 2 is Cork and Meath the weekend. It'll be very interesting to see how your old colleague does in Cullum. And how we approach that game. It's a big game, as mentioned, for new managers. So I'm assuming Cullum is going to be looking at that game as a big one for himself, especially in Cork. So that'll be an interesting dynamic. But yeah, it's a minefield. Usually years gone past, you'd probably have 4 or 5 teams that you probably could say are going to finish in top 2 this year. And if you're one off it, probably Dublin, Derry look like the 2 hot spots to take it. So, but I'm probably more interested in probably looking at the bottom 2 for Division 2 this year, who could be potentially go down. So I know you mentioned Limerick Live, but you just don't know. Could have a good day against Clare or some of these teams. So I mean, it's going to be a very interesting dynamic how the bottom half more so than the top half looks this year.
Yeah, Rory, there is also the added carrot there for a few teams of a trip to Croke Park to play Dublin, and Dublin's kind of you know, nomination of Croke Park as their quote unquote home stadium for the league has often rubbed other counties up the wrong way, or certain people when they're in Division Two and the Croke Park pitch looks the way the Croke Park pitch looks, as your esteemed friends pointed out to you during the week.
Disgrace!
I wonder, I'd be interested to see the attendances they get. Will it make a bit of a difference to Dublin fans what division they're in, especially when they're playing Kildare? That's a game they'll probably want to turn up for. Or like, could we see 12, 15,000 people swimming around Croke Park, at which point people will be asking, why are we playing this in Croke Park?
I think they have a fantastic following. I think people don't realize. You see, Dublin is a peculiar animal in that the club scene in Dublin, I mean, it's very poorly followed. You could go to a Dublin County semi-final, which might feature Ballymun, Ballybowden, Kilmacud, and Nafina. There'd be 500 people at the match. The people in Dublin support the county teams. So I think irregardless, if they were in Division 4, there'll be 10 or 15,000 at it. You know, they're going down to Cork in the middle of late February. I'd say they'll bring 5,000 or 6,000 down. You know, Cork are only wetting their lips at the prospect of them coming down. So like, they have a massive following. I don't think that'll impact it in any way. And as regards minding the pitch, I just don't understand that at all. But anyway, I think they've been playing in Croke Park for the best part of 10 years. I don't think it's that much of a big deal at this stage for most teams. And a lot of the opposition teams are quite happy to go in there anyway and get a little bit of experience in advance of championship. So I think that's a bit nonplussed. I think from Dublin's perspective, a big thing for them is the fact that they've got Jack McCaffrey back, Paul
Mannion at some stage.
yeah, and you also have Giller back in the mix in terms of the back room. I'd say there's a much better settled spirit. I think the key thing for them is going to be to try and avoid the kinds of injuries. If you look at when they were going toe to toe with Lee's brilliant team, they were blessed, I felt, in that they never seemed to pick up any injuries. They were always very injury free. Whatever they were doing athletically, aerobically, they always seemed to be able to pick from a full complement, and everybody was fit and healthy. For the last year or two, whether it was been James McCarthy, and obviously we saw Conor Callaghan basically miss the remainder of the season because he got man of the match in the Leinster final against Kildare, and then we didn't see him again. And injuries have been kind of a big problem for them. I think if they can avoid injuries to key players, and I'm talking leaders now, the likes of James Mack, the likes of Fenton, the likes of the Jack McCaffreys and Conor Callaghans, I think Dublin will be in great shape, and I'd make them favourites to win the All-Ireland at this juncture.
You're always a man to get your prediction in early. Let's see the teams play a couple of times, Rory. You know.
And the only good thing as well is
I think they went out.
They
went out on a half a leg against Kerry, and Kerry scraped over the line with a wonder score at the end into a gale force win.
Oh, I know it's not exactly a controversial prediction or anything. I'm just having fun, Peter. There's a survey of Ulster teams in Division 1, and there's only one in Division 2, and they're the Ulster champions and kind of the team of last year. So if Dublin are seen as a lot of people's, you know, kind of pick to win Division 2, I'd be looking at that saying Derry, who were very unlucky not to get out of Division 2 last year, let's be honest. I think would you think that that's something that, given the championship success Roy got out last year, do you think that's something to be focused on? He needs to be a Division 1 team, or do you think it really matters and Division 2 offers as good a prep as any?
No, absolutely. He wants to take a squad into Division 1. He believes they're good enough. They're Ulster champions. And the fact that he's taken the Dr. McKenna Cup as seriously as he has, he's more or less played the same in the 3 games. He's more or less played the same team, and he has unearthed a few new players because he's had to, with the Glen players not being available. So absolutely, Dublin to finish top and Derry to come a close second. Regarding the point that Rory made about the Dublin, I think they should be playing. I would prefer to see them playing their league games in Parnell Park. Obviously, they want to play in Croke Park. Opposing teams would prefer to play in Croke Park, but just as a neutral for a spectacle, it's a much better. You can't hear the Dublin supporters in a National League game, and it's very hard. It's devoid of atmosphere. The National League games.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
Whereas when you get them to Parnell Park and some of the best games we played against them in the league, we're there.
Cracking atmosphere.
And that goes with any ground and for games in the championship. So especially when the pitch is in the condition that it's in, maybe they could rest it for a few weeks and take a few games to Parnell Park. The big game for me in Division 2 is Lee makes a point about the teams at the bottom, and they're going to be fighting hard. Clare play Louth, and the losers of that game after round 1 will be saying, where are we going to get our points out of here? So you're looking for massive games this weekend, none bigger than Clare and Louth.
Yeah. I don't think any of us are surprised by the fact that, Mickey Hart has had pretty much instant success in Louth, and Peter, you know him as well as anybody. He's obviously, he wouldn't be setting a ceiling for Louth either. It's not like, well, we've reached Division 2 now, lads. Let's tread water here. He obviously doesn't have the kind of the player resources that some of the other teams there do. But like, there'll be no want of ambition from the wee county, I would imagine.
Absolutely not, and I've no doubt that he would have set his team a target of making the provincial final. And making the route to Sam Maguire that way. They play Westmeath in the Leinster Championship, and if they win that, there's a good chance that they could be playing Meath in a semi-final. So he'll certainly target that. But yes, if Clare, if Louth can get over Clare and finish, in the top half of Division 2, then there's a very good chance they'll be in the race for Sam Maguire. So that, without a doubt, he will have high target and high standards for his Louth side. But that's a big one. He's up against a very experienced Clare side, and with Colin Collins there many years. Is this his 10th year? I think he's been
10th year. He's the longest serving in one county. Yeah.
So that's a big one. That's a big one for the first game out.
Yeah. Okay, lads. This isn't to be we're not being disparaging in Divisions 3 and Division 4. My own county, Wexford, are long time Division 4 residents, shall we say. So I do have quite an interest in Division 4, but shall we say we'll let the cards play out there for a week or two before we do too much on those divisions, and that's basically because we can't be too informed. We'll see how the matches go, and we do cover Divisions 3 and 4. Because I'm obliged to talk about Wexford or I get in trouble. And Wicklow, because I live in Wicklow, I get in trouble if I don't also talk about Wicklow.
You're a jack of all trades, Mikey. You seem to be everywhere.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a fair description of me, I think, Lee. I'm much like yourself. I can play defence, but I can also come forward. Yeah, that's what you meant. Wasn't it? Lads, it's great to have you on, and we look forward to chatting to you during the year. And obviously, just to mention, as always, the game the two boys are working on Saturday nights on RT2 and the RT Player, Mayo v Galway, and there'll be extensive coverage of the league across RT Radio 1 on Saturday and Sunday Sport, and League Sunday will be back on your televisions on Sunday night. So it's back. Rejoice. There may not be the hype of last year that me and Rory noticed, but it'll build. So Lee, Peter, thank you very much for joining us, and to Rory, myself and Rory will be back on Monday to review the weekend's action. Chat to you then. Good luck. Goodbye.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, lads.
Cheers.
How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.